So today we're going to be building a wooden Naginata for training, and it's a beautiful day in November, so we're going to be outside so you can hear a bit of the birds. And so a Naginata is something, it's a training weapon that I've wanted to have for a while in our dojo. It consists basically of a sword on top of a staff. So they vary in range and height a bit. The one that I'm making today is a 6-foot tall staff with about an 18-inch sword on top of it. And so I'm going to go through the process of how we're doing this. The process started with first making a 6-foot long staff. And what I'm doing here is that I'm actually taking wood pieces that are 4 feet long, which are here, which I've gotten from Home Depot. These pieces are oak. They're a 1/2 inch thick by 1.5 inches wide. And I'm gluing them together because I want a profile that is 1 inch wide and 1.5 inches deep. You can't actually buy that because wood comes in, dimensional lumber comes in sizes that are standard, and you would have to take a larger piece and strip it or rip it to make that piece. So I'm just trying to combine pieces. I'm using epoxy glue to bind things together. The epoxy glue that I'm using has a reported strength that should be greater than the tensile strength of the wood itself. So if something breaks, it should break through the wood and not through the epoxy, if I've done this correctly. So what I've done here is that I've laid out a piece of 4-foot long piece with staggered joints. So I have actually 3 pieces here together, 2 4-foot long and 2 2-foot long at the end. So I'm going to strip. This has been curing for a few hours now. I'm going to take the clamps away and see how it's looking. You can see here the joints. That's the joint between 2 boards with epoxy in between them. And I think it ended up quite nicely. So we have a joint on this side, and then 4 feet away at the third points we have the joints on the other side here. So I've given this a first sanding pass, nothing crazy, just to get rid of the excess epoxy that was at the edge. So you can see now that we have a much smoother joint. So that's the joint between 2 boards, and you can see the epoxy line there and the joint in between the 2 boards here. You still can see some of the epoxy. We're going to do a lot of sanding by the end of this, so I'm not worried about that. And so the next step is we're going to route a trench at the end of the board to accept the blade. I think the trench is going to be like 5 inches long by 1/2 inch wide, and that piece, that trench should accept the blade which I've drawn in this board. This is where we're going to try to cut out of the piece. So a 1/2 inch wide strip, leaving a 1/4 inch on each side, going from 5.5 inches deep and all the way through the piece. So for that we're going to use a router. I'm going to build the jig so that the router moves only on that line, and let's see how it goes. I've never done this before, so let's hope for the best. So it started to rain, so I moved inside into our dojo space, which also serves as sort of my shop. And so what I'm going to show you is that right now what I've done is that I built this jig, which will allow the router to move in a straight line without going past the edges of the cut that I want to make. So hopefully this will allow me to make a cut that is exactly or very close to the path that I've drawn here. So I'm going to do half the board, then flip it around, do the other half, and hopefully that works. So this is a crucial part, so let's see. If it doesn't work, then we'll have to change plans. So that seems to have worked fine. I think I'm happy with that. So you can see we've done half of the cut. I'm going to flip it over and do the other half, and hopefully things align and it will work out. So we are done routing, and I am very happy with this. I think this turned out better than I expected. You can see how I've been able to cut through the board. We're gonna take it out now and check it out. So remember, this was 1 inch wide. I've routed out 1/2 inch, so we have 1/4 inch here and 1/4 inch here. We're gonna measure it and see if that's what we ended up with, but it seems that it worked out better than what I thought it would. Okay, so the next step will be routing the edges of the piece. So we make round corners. So here it is. It took a long time because it's a long piece and I had to do it in sections, but I was able to route all the corners. So you can see now it's rounded. I need to do some sanding. I mean, there's lots more sanding to do here, but this piece is almost ready. Now we have to work on the blade and on the suba and then bring it all together. It's another beautiful afternoon in November with excellent weather, so we are going to keep working on the Naginata. The handle or the staff is pretty much done, and now today we're going to attempt to finish the blade and the suba and maybe put it all together. So what I have here is I have this piece of board that I'm going to cut today with a circular or saw, and then finish it off with the jigsaw for the blade. I think I'm going to cut the longer blade. And on the right hand side here I have the suba, which I roughly drawn the shape. So I'm also going to cut that right now. And let's see how that goes. So here it is, the blade, which we need to finish, but then the staff with the slot that we cut last time to receive the blade. Okay, now that we have the blade and the staff, we're going to work on the suba. So here we go, we're going to cut this piece. This is also a 1/2 inch thick oak board. You can see here that I've drawn sort of the rough outline of the suba. So I'm going to use the jigsaw to just cut it around. And then most interestingly is going to be cutting the inside, routing out the inside to go through the blade and above the staff. That will be the most interesting part, which we'll do after cutting this. So what I did next is that I took the router and rounded the edges of the blade, which ended up being quite nice over here. Not so nice towards the tip, but I expected that. So I'm gonna just clean that up with sandpaper, but it's coming along nicely. So next step is now sanding. So after some work, this is where we stand. We have a suba and we have the blade, and now we have a good fit between the two of them. Okay, and this will then go here. Then we're going to fill the gaps, glue it all together with epoxy glue, with 2-part epoxy, which should be stronger than the wood itself. And then fill all these gaps with a mixture of epoxy and sawdust. Now, one thing that I want to do before that is I want to take the suba and actually route the edges so that they are cleaner and they're rounder like the blade. I find that it's just too blocky. Then ultimately, I'm going to drill 2 holes here and hammer in 2 wood dowels that will help bring things together. So that worked out nicely. So there you go, right? That's a much more refined tsuba. Rounded edges. I mean, it still needs a lot of sanding, but it's getting there. And it would look much better when it's mounted on the Naginata. I'm happy with that. So that's looking much better now. And now I'm just going to start gluing all these pieces together with epoxy. So now I moved inside because now I'm going to glue the blade, the tsuba, and the staff together. And for that, I'm going to use this 2-part epoxy by Gorilla. And this is a product that has worked well for me in the past. It has about a 5-minute work time, and it completely cures in about 24 hours. So I'm going to be mixing this in this cup. Likely I'm going to be adding some sawdust at the end just as a filler. I'm going to clamp it together and let it set for a few hours before we do anything else. So after applying the epoxy, I have clamped down the piece. The epoxy is working. We're going to leave it untouched for a few hours and then come back and do another pass at filling gaps with more resin and probably a mixture of resin and sawdust. Okay, so at least 24 hours have passed. The epoxy is now cured and hardened. The operation that we're going to do now is insert 2 wooden dowels through the shaft and through the blade. And so what I have here is if I have 5/16-inch dowels that I've cut from a longer piece, I'm going to drill 2 holes roughly about 3 inches apart. This whole thing is 5 inches, so I'm getting an inch and an inch of edge distance. And then I'm going to hammer in the dowels. And after that, I'm just going to do a second epoxy operation just to try to fill the gaps a little bit more. This is it. This is how it looks after sanding. The pins are installed. The epoxy has cured. So here it is, the finished piece. I am so happy how it turned out. It's better than expected. We used it today for training in the dojo and it worked great. And I'm just so proud of it. I know that there's definitely ways to improve and we're working and everything that I did here, but I learned so much making it and I think it's a great addition for the dojo. And it will bring us years of good training. So I hope you enjoyed the build. Maybe you learned something from it. Maybe you're encouraged to start building your own weapons and your own training tools. And hopefully this is helpful for you. It definitely was for me. You can definitely go out and buy training tools. There's places where you can go out and buy good quality Naginata. Nothing like this, because this is something that I made and I learned a lot in the process. And so I can go out, spend money, buy something, or I can spend my own money in trying to make something for myself, and this is it. I encourage you to do the same if you have space and tools. It doesn't take much. Again, it's a great process. I'm very happy how it turned up. So something that I think is really cool after finishing a project like this is just thinking about where it started. And this whole process just started with this piece of wood. And it's just incredible to me that it goes from this to this. Just a bit of material and then a whole lot of work. So if you like this video, if you found it entertaining or helpful, and hopefully you've learned something from it, please like the video, share it with others, subscribe to the channel. That helps us keep going. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next build.